We're walking our way through the book of Genesis. It's been fascinating so far. This is the book of origins. We learn about so much of how God set up the arrival of the Messiah. Remember, everything in the Bible is about the Messiah, about the coming Messiah and what he's going to do for us. From the very first verse of Genesis all the way to the very last verse in Revelation, this is a book about Jesus. Now, we are currently talking about, and we have been talking about for the last few chapters, Abraham. We all know who Abraham is. He's very important in God's plan. He has basically started the family that will become the family of the Messiah. And we even get let in on some of the more mundane events of his life. And the reason we get to see that part of Abraham's life is so that we can learn to relate to him. God wants us to know he will pick out just anybody in order for him to help, for that person to help him bring about all of his plans of redemption. It's important for us to learn to relate to Abraham and how he reacts to God's calling. We are currently in the 21st chapter of Genesis. We're almost finished with it. Last time, as you remember, we closed out our discussion of the deeply emotional story of the banishment of Hagar and Ishmael. We are up to the 22nd verse, and you're going to notice that there is an unusual and almost complete change in the narrative. And I only mean unusual in the sense that it seems so sudden and so disconnected that you would almost expect a chapter break here, but the scholars decided to keep the following little vignette bundled with the above story of Hagar and Ishmael. Now, let me quickly remind you that chapter and verse are not original in any of the books of the Bible, and we know this because they were not present in any of the oldest manuscripts. If they weren't in the manuscripts, then we know they weren't in the originals. In fact, chapter and verse, these divisions in the Bible, were not added until relatively recently. Now, I mean, it was in medieval times, which you might not think of as recent, but compared to how old the Bible is, it actually is quite recent. In the Bible timeline, 400 years ago was basically yesterday. Nevertheless, the point is, chapter and verse are not divinely inspired, but instead were added by men at a much later date. And actually, the current placement of chapter and verse isn't even in the place they were first put in. The locations have changed several times down through the centuries and have only become standardized within, say, the last 1 or 2 centuries. Now, one last thing about this topic. The reason chapter and verse were placed in the Bible was to aid in memorization and study. And I believe for the most part, in fact, in the vast majority of the time, it does just that and actually is incredibly valuable to those of us who want to get to know God better. All right, enough of that. I just wanted to say something about this rather rapid viewpoint change because I'm sure you're going to notice. Verse 22, and it came to pass at that time. Now, interestingly, Albert Barnes argues that this next event, the one we're about to talk about, actually happened before the above mentioned banishment. And I'm not sure why he believes that. He says it has something to do with what he called the common law of Hebrew narrative. I don't know what that is, nor why it's important. Then why are you bothering us with that? Well, I don't know. I just like sharing these little tidbits with you. I think it gets our brains working when we ponder these tiny details. Besides, sue me. I love the Bible. What can I say? Verse 22 again. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phichol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Verse 23, therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. So, as you can see, Abimelech is back in the picture. And we notice that he's up to his old tricks. Now, I'm not criticizing him. I'm just saying that this king of Gerar is always thinking, isn't he? As you remember when we were going over chapter 20, that I proffered the theory that this guy was not treating Abraham kindly and courteously because he saw in the patriarch some sort of brother in worship, as certain scholars have suggested. He wasn't seeking spiritual fellowship with the wealthy rancher from the land of the Chaldees. The prevailing scholarship paints Abimelech as some sort of frontier-dwelling believer. I mean, they say he's principled and he's fair and he's generous. Therefore, that must mean he is a saint of God. And I argued at the time that I didn't see any evidence of that. Now, some of you may say, well, wait a second, John, didn't God appear to him in a dream? And surely if that happened, he must be pretty special. Now, why would you say that? What evidence do you have for coming to such a conclusion? You see, this is my point. We seem to like to put God in a box. We want to make him predictable and obvious so we can say he only does this or he only does that, as if God is some sort of wind-up, unthinking automaton. Well, God appeared to that man Abimelech not because he's special, but because he had to. His plan of redemption was at risk, and he took the unusual step of showing up to fix things. The promised seed, the one who would form the family of the Messiah, was about to come on the scene, and the cowardice and foolishness of Abraham and Sarah put that whole thing in jeopardy. How do you mean? I don't have any time. Go back and listen to our teaching on the last chapter. It's on YouTube. It's on our podcast pages, or will be soon. Anyhow, it's my contention that almost everything Abimelech did or said, including, by the way, taking Sarah for his wife, was meant to build alliances with that powerful rancher and warlord from up north. Abimelech was buttering up Abraham because he knew there would be a payoff one day. And guess what? Here we are. The day has finally come where all that kindness and humility and forgiveness are going to pay the dividends he was hoping they would. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phichol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. Now just quickly, some of the critics want you to believe that this isn't the same Abimelech as the one we met in the last chapter. They surmise that this is another king, but with the same name. Perhaps a son or another relative who's trying to trade on the good reputation of Abimelech the first. Well, If that were the case, there's nothing whatsoever to tell us that here in this account or any other in the Bible. Therefore, we have to assume that this isn't true, and this is the very same king of the Philistines that we were reading about one chapter ago. Well, we're also introduced to someone named Phichol. It's an interesting name, which in the Hebrew means mouth of all. H.C. Leupold assumes that he is so named because he is somehow representing the people. He is their voice, as it were. Of course, no way to verify that, but it makes sense to me. Clearly, this isn't some chance meetup, some impromptu get together. These guys didn't bump into each other in the checkout line in Home Depot. The king and one of his top ministers have come to speak or are present to speak to a very important dignitary. In other words, this seems to be an official meeting with an agenda. Now, another thing to note here is what is said to Abraham. Now, in my opinion, maybe not in yours, but it seems to be unclear who actually says this. Now, we'll get into what they said in just a second, but I just want to point out that the English translation that we have is vague as to which of these two Philistines actually made the comment. Was this Abimelech or was it Phichol? Now, is that really important? Probably not, but I think it does give a modest tone change if one as opposed to the other is responsible. If the king said it, then this is quite a humble statement. Listen to me, it's not very common for the highest authority in the land to give out such powerful accolades. Now, of course, Abimelech knows it's true. I mean, he has firsthand experience that God is with Abraham and everything he does. In fact, as we were just mentioning, God himself told the Philistine king how important Abraham is to him. Remember, he actually appeared in his dream. God appeared to Abimelech in a dream to defend and commend his servant Abraham. But what if this compliment didn't come from Abimelech, but rather from Phichol, the magistrate? Well, to me, that means one of two things. I'll share my opinion in a moment. If Phichol said it to Abraham, God is with thee in all that thou doest, he's either sincere or insincere. Again, if Abimelech said it, then we can be certain that he was sincere. After all, he already knows the special bond between God and Abraham, and he also knows not to mess with it. He tried sarcasm with God before, and I don't think he's going to do that again. He narrowly escaped God's wrath last time. He's likely learned his lesson. But Phichol is not so easy to figure out. No doubt he heard of what happened last time with Sarah and the dream and all of that. But did he believe it? Did he care? After all, he's a pagan who's trying to be a good administrator for his king. If Phichol gave Abraham this compliment and was sincere, then this is truly an important endorsement. This would mean that God's work in Abraham's life is becoming obvious and notable to those outside Abraham's circle. If he meant it, then this high-ranking Philistine is recognizing that there's something very special about this man. He can see in some way that Abraham is remarkable. But to a cynic like me, to someone who's somewhat familiar with history, it's very difficult to come to that conclusion. I mean, this is a diplomat. This is a government official who has a job to do. In ancient times, this wasn't just, employment. When you were tasked with the affairs of your king's business, you took it seriously. I mean, failure didn't mean the loss of your livelihood. It meant the loss of your head. The focus is always on the task at hand, and I think it's impossible to determine Phichol's sincerity if he was the one who said, God is with thee in all that thou doest. But I think his insincerity is more likely than his sincerity. If the chief administrator, or whatever Phichol is, if he said it, then I can't help but think it's a rather hollow platitude, something some bureaucrat blurts out with only the intention to flatter, manipulate, and get negotiations started on pleasant footing. It may be clearer in the Hebrew as to who is the speaker, but since I don't know how to speak the ancient tongues, coupled with the fact that in reviewing the commentaries, I guess I'm the only one who wonders about it because no one else addresses it, so I can't even give you one of the experts' opinions. I guess I have to add this to the list of questions for heaven. John, why do we go through these things? You ask us these questions and then give us no answer. Because I'm trying to make the Bible real to you. I'm trying to get you in the habit of asking questions, putting yourself in the story. Make this a 3D rendition, not just a flat thing you read on the page. Make it real. Put life into it because you can. This isn't just dead language. This is something you can learn from if you make it real. Anyhow, one of these two guys says, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Let me repeat. From one, this is a very high compliment. From the other, it might just be an opening statement meant to sweet talk a wealthy rancher. Either way, of course, it's true. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phichol, the chief captain of his hosts, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God, that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. Clearly, the next statement is Abimelech. It appears he wants to formalize in front of witnesses, important witnesses, the arrangement he has with this powerful nomad. It looks like he's seeking some guarantees regarding Abraham's dealings with himself and his posterity. Not that it's terribly important to point out, but in the original, there's a bit of interesting alliteration here. The King James made a poor attempt at reproducing it when they translated it, my son's son. Now, no one can really blame them. It's always difficult to transfer clever prose between languages and cultures, actually. Some scholars say the expression is more like kith and kin. Now, that's better, of course, but kith is not a word too many of us use. Not that kin is all that common. And actually, it's not a very good translation. It may preserve the alliterative aspect of the Hebrew, but it's a bit of a shoehorning attempt at best. Besides, the original meaning of kith and kin is really more like country and relatives. Yeah, I guess we've modified that since the beginning, but that doesn't make this any better of a translation. Again, except for the fact that there is the alliteration, but with a spurious at best connection to the Hebrew. Now, the Septuagint, the well-known and well-regarded Greek language translation of the Hebrew scriptures, places Greek words there that are equivalent to our words seed and name, perhaps closer in meaning, but misses the alliterative element that makes this statement interesting and notable. Again, there's no easy way to capture the whole essence of the original. By the way, the original is pronounced poorly by me, Nini and Nekti. Nini and Nekti, there's the alliteration, and they basically mean my offspring and my descendant. So back to this statement Abimelech is making. He apparently wants some assurance that this agreement that they made will survive them both and carry on into the future. Verse 23 again, now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, Nekti and Nini, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. Aha, there we have it. The truth finally comes out. Abimelech is now looking for that long sought after payoff. He's calling in that pre-planned quid pro quo. You can throw out all that righteous king nonsense. So much for the assumed generous, forgiving, humanitarian character of the ruler of Gerar. Abimelech all along was looking for this cozy little arrangement. I've been trying to tell you that all of those good deeds had a background motive, and here it is right here. Now therefore swear unto me by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. You came here, Abraham. You saw how well I treated you, even though you really could have got me in some trouble. I gave you gifts. I even invited you to take any piece of land you wanted. That was my kindness to you. Kindness, my Aunt Fanny, as my mother would say. Abimelech wasn't acting out of kindness when he forgave Abraham and handed over to him all that loot and gave him his choice of dwelling places. That old Philistine king knew what he was doing all along. He was securing his future, and all it cost him was a few trinkets and a slice of his country for Abraham to ply his trade and live in peace, with the resulting kickback, I'm sure. Abraham, no doubt, was feeling pressure sort of to make this deal after all that transpired in that previous chapter. He's a good guy. Abimelech is counting on Abraham's honor to make him a few bucks. You kind of owe me, Abraham. Verse 24, and Abraham said, I will swear. Abimelech's plan works. Abraham gives in and promises that he will not deal falsely with Abimelech, nor his children, nor his children's children. But Abraham is never without a few tricks up his own sleeve. He knows that even if you owe the other guy a big favor, covenants are never one-sided affairs, except the ones we have with God, but that's not our topic at the moment. This is an agreement between two wealthy, powerful men, and Abraham is no dummy. And so he uses this opportunity, the striking of a new contract, to air a few of his own important grievances. Verse 25, and Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. Listen to me. If your livelihood is raising livestock in a desert, then you're dependent on good sources of water. Of course, cattle are living beings, and living beings need water. Listen, if we're going to cooperate with each other in this business, Abimelech, you need to tell your boys to back off my wells. Fighting over water sources was one of the most common occurrences in those days and in that land. The locations that you use to refresh your animals was severely limited and needed to be reliable and protected. Okay, fine. Let's covenant with one another, but I need you to straighten this well thing out or no one's going to make a dime. And I think the wording here is rather evocative. Abraham said the seizing of this well was done violently. The original infers a robbery had been committed. Now, I'm sure there was a skirmish between Abraham's men and Abimelech's men, and Abraham is saying, is this any way to conduct business with a partner? Well, this story isn't over yet, but let's leave it there for now. And next time, let's see what that old king has to say about Abraham's counteroffer. See you then.